I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines of the hour. India's National Investigation Agency has arrested Amir Rashid Ali, a Kashmir resident accused of conspiring with the driver of last week's deadly Delhi car blast that killed 12. The agency says the car was registered in Ali's name and alleges he worked with the suspected suicide bomber Mohammed Umar. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says gas supplies from Greece will begin in January under a new agreement to deliver US-supplied LNG to Ukraine throughout the winter. During his visit to Athens, he thanked President Donald Trump, saying the deal ensures Ukraine can receive natural gas not only from Greece but also via Greece. Russia says its forces have advanced in southeastern Zaporozhye as part of a broader push to take the region. Drone footage shows soldiers holding Russian flags, though Ukraine has not yet commented. The UK Labour government says it will end automatic benefits for asylum seekers as part of a push to cut irregular migration. The Interior Ministry says the overhaul will follow Denmark's strict immigration model. China says its Coast Guard has patrolled the waters around the Japan-controlled Senkaku Islands amid soaring tensions over Tokyo's Taiwan comments. Beijing insists the islands are its territory as tensions between Tokyo and Beijing rise. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reaffirms his opposition to a Palestinian state after far-right allies protest a US-backed UN statement. He says his position remains unchanged as Washington and Muslim-majority nations support a draft resolution linked to Trump's Gaza plan. Voting has begun in Chile's general elections, dominated by debates on crime and immigration that have boosted far-right Iron Fist campaigns. Results are expected within hours after polls close later today. Ecuador begins a national referendum on whether to allow foreign military bases as one of President Noboa's plans to boost security. The move faces division among voters, with supporters citing the crime crisis and critics warning of sovereignty losses. We start this hour in South Asia, and India's Federal Anti-Terror Agency has arrested a Kashmir resident, Amir Rashid Ali, over last week's deadly car blast in Delhi that killed 12 people and injured at least 20. Authorities say Ali conspired with the alleged suicide bomber Mohammed Umar from Pulwama and facilitated the purchase of the car used in the attack. The National Investigation Agency seized another vehicle belonging to Umar and has interrogated 73 witnesses, including survivors. Officials confirmed that the car acted as a vehicle-borne improvised explosive device. The Indian government called the incident a terror attack and promised swift justice. The explosion outside the historic Red Fort is the first such blast in Delhi since 2011, highlighting serious security concerns in the capital. Okay, now joining us is Major General A.K. Sawatch. He's a geostrategic expert and he joins us live from New Delhi, India. Thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World, Major General Sawatch. Where are we in this investigation, and how satisfied are you in how it is moving forward, the arrests that are being made, etc.?
No doubt about it. The investigation is on the track. Those possibly who were involved in this blast have been by and large nabbed. There will be further investigation will be carried out, and then you will get more lead. But one can say whatever we have received so far, it is a tip in an iceberg. Because remember, this is a new type of terror which has now come to light. It is a white-collar terror ecosystem. Now, you know, the doctors are the ones which protect the life of human beings. They do not take the lives of human beings. So therefore, they are the least suspected in the society. The way there is, doctors across has been now involved in this incident, this is a cause of concern. And another thing which is very important is that initially when you have already got a lead in Srinagar, where Jaish Mohammed poster was put, thereafter this lead came to Alafullah University there in Faridabad, and you have nabbed Jamil, then Adil, then Sahin. This Muhammad Nabi managed to escape. He gave a sort of skip to the authorities, and thereafter for 10 days he was moving from place A to place B. So that was the time when he should have been nabbed. So therefore it looks like that there's some intelligence failure, no doubt about it, that we will not able to nab him, and then finally he has done a blast in front of the Red Fort. But also remember one thing, in last about 12 to 14 years, there have been no major incident which has taken place in India other than Jammu and Kashmir. Now the credit also goes to the National Investigation Agency and other intelligence agencies, because there is a cooperation, coordination between agencies at the state level and the central level. And the real-time intelligence is being passed, you can say horizontally and vertically, and no incident has taken place. But that faith has been totally shaken by what has happened on 10th November, and this module which is now coming up is a cause of concern, and it seemingly looks to be, it may be spread in a larger area. And now the investigation is on, the NIA has already taken over, and it will proceed. Today, Rashid, who was the owner of I-20, has been also nabbed. I am sure once he'll be investigated, many more things will come out. So I only can say the investigation seemingly looks to be on track. More people will be arrested and they will be interrogated. The larger picture has to be seen. And this is not confined to few doctors. You will find that there will be many more which will be involved. What was their modus operandi? Who was the one who was passing information and guiding them? As on today, it seemingly looks to be that there is Ukasa which is sitting in Turkey, and he was giving them instruction. But this Ukasa has been handled by Jaish Mohammed and ISI from Pakistan, and also there is a link of Afghanistan. So the point is, it is a Jaish Mohammed module, and there are a number of other overground workers in sleeper cell. They need to be also identified and also nabbed. But certainly it looks like that as far as our investigation is concerned, it is on the track and it is going in a time manner. However, there is another thing which has happened, which could have been also avoided, that ammonia nitrate, which is being used actually in a fertilizer. This almost about 3 tons was collected by these doctors, and what they have done is that once you mix up with the fuel oil, it becomes very, you can say very active, and then it can be detonated. So therefore, getting the fertilizer is not a big issue, but if you get 3 tons, this should have caused suspicion. Now the point is coming is when almost about 300 kg was taken from Faridabad to Srinagar in Navgaon, how come it exploded? No, the point is, was there any detonator in this? How has this accident taken place? And that was what is a cause of concern, should have been on. Now, some of the investigators are telling there is a material called TATP, that tritone triple oxide. If you mix up with this, basically the fuel and also ammonia nitrate, and you mix this mixture, then it can be exploded. Now, how far it is true, one has to investigate. I, having served for 3 decades in Kashmir Valley, I always knew that until and unless the explosive is not detonated with the help of detonator, and it is given energy in terms of external energy like electrical or battery, it will not explode. But here this explosion had taken place in Navgaon. Investigation is on. What was the shortcoming, what mistake was committed, that will also come. But overall, it looks like that investigation is going on the track, and you will find a larger picture. But this is a cause of concern. This new terror, which is white-collar terror network, which has now coming to light, is really surprised everyone, and it is a cause of concern.
Yes, Major General A.K. Sawatch, thank you very much for bringing that insight into the ongoing and, of course, developing situation finds ourselves here in Delhi. We will, of course, here on NewsX bring you all the updates coming out of that developing situation as soon as we get them and bring them straight to you. We now move over to Europe for our next story, and the Russian Defense Ministry has released images showing small groups of soldiers holding Russian flags in the village of Vinnopilia, claiming the capture of 2 more settlements in southern Ukraine. The ministry said this advance is part of a broader push in Zaporozhye, aiming to seize full control of the region. Drone footage released by Russia shows soldiers with national and battalion flags near the local buildings. The authenticity and date of the footage could not be independently confirmed, however. The ministry also announced that its forces captured Mala Tomachka, raising concerns that nearby towns Huliopol and Orkhiv could face a pincer threat. Ukraine has not issued any immediate comment on the reported advances, however. Gilbert Doctorow joins us now. He's an international affairs expert and he joins us live from Brussels. Of course, Gilbert, this comes during Russian efforts to capture the Zaporozhye region, which is part of the wider Donetsk. What is the military significance of it, the importance, and what advantages would Moscow get from taking a hold of the region as a whole?
Well, Zaporozhye is mostly in the news because it has a major nuclear power station, and that is under the control of the Russians, as it has been from the very start of the war. But it is not the whole of Zaporozhye region. And what the Russians have been doing incrementally is clawing back more and more of Zaporozhye. And this is one of the Russian-speaking oblasts or regions of eastern Ukraine that constitutes the broader area that's called Novorossiya, New Russia. We have heard from the very beginning of this war about the Donbass. The Donbass is 2 regions that are mostly in Russian control. Donetsk, as you said a moment ago, and its neighboring region just to the north of Lugansk. However, the larger Novorossiya virtually takes in all of eastern Ukraine east of the Dnieper River. So each incremental conquest, and every day read about 1 or 2 villages that are taken by Russian forces. These are generally small. However, there are some big urban areas that are being contested, and that you hear every couple of days about Pokrovsk, known in Russia as Krasnoyarsk. It is this city, in particular in the center of Donetsk, that is the major point of conflict. So there are many incremental small chains all across the 700-mile, 1,200-kilometer front that is a line of confrontation between Russia and Ukraine. And a report that such as you made is the sort of thing we hear day to day. It doesn't change the general strength of Russia's position, but it is indicating that the Ukrainians are losing ground.
Yes, and Gilbert, of course, Moscow talks about a possible pincer around the likes of Huliopol and Orkhiv. With Russia reportedly struggling in manpower and equipment across other fronts, is that militarily realistic or just messaging?
Oh, it is realistic. I can't comment on what sort of deficiencies the Russians have. This is a narrative from the other side of the barricades. On the side that I'm on, we are not aware that there's a shortage of anything. And so I am taking with a dim view the notion that Russia cannot cover all of its desired territory for acquisition. What they are doing is shifting troops around. When they sense that the Ukrainians are weak in one part of this very long front line, then they move forces there. They do what they have to do, and then they move them out to other areas. So the 2 sides are moving forces all the time. It's not just the Russians and not just the Ukrainians. If you look at the map, the Russians, without question, are incrementally taking territory. Now, there are some among my peers who believe that Russian victory is a few days away or a few weeks away. I have abandoned that kind of projection because the war, every time that the war seems to be headed in a clear victory, there is some escalation that changes the calculation. What I do say, though, is that a Russian move to the Dnieper River is almost unstoppable at this point.
Gilbert, in your opinion then, what would go down as territorial victory in this war? Of course, it seems as if the war is going as it is, that Russia wouldn't be able to get the entirety of Ukraine. However, the Eastern Front, the Donbass, there's potential there. What do you think Vladimir Putin would be happy with when it comes to territory in this conflict?
Let us recall that from the very beginning, when Mr. Putin set out the objectives of what he called a special military operation, as opposed to an all-out war, these were denazification, that is to say, regime change in Kiev, and demilitarization, meaning the destruction of the very large Ukrainian armed forces. He did not describe any particular objective for territorial gain. And that remains the situation today. The Russians are not counting victory in terms of each additional square kilometer that they capture. They're counting victory in terms of the destruction of the Ukrainian armed forces, which is proceeding. However, there are too many cheerleaders on the side of Russia in the West who are saying that Russia will take the whole of Ukraine, that Russia will win the war when it reaches the Polish border and so forth. I don't subscribe to that at all. Russia has no intention of moving beyond the Dnieper, not because Russia is kind and generous, but because to move beyond the Dnieper is to move into strictly Ukrainian national ethnic region, whereas the area east of the Dnieper is mixed populations of people who consider themselves Russian speakers and people who consider themselves to be Ukrainian speakers. So the Russians have no desire to move into an area where they would be conquerors of a subjugated people who despise them and who would make their lives very difficult in occupation. Okay. However, the Russians do want to reduce Ukraine so that militarily it is not a threat in the future. And I can see a final objective of Russia before it declares, shall we say, victory, to take Odessa, which is an important port, which is coveted by the French and the British for their naval installations, and which, if it is taken by Russia, deprives the Western backers of Kiev of any reason to continue fighting.
Gilbert, thank you. Do stay with us. It's fascinating stuff, though. We move on next, and we move to Serbia. And President Alexander Vučić has said that Serbia has 7 days to decide on steps to safeguard fuel supplies from the Russian-owned NIS refinery without nationalization. Washington seeks complete Russian divestment from NIS, giving owners 3 months to find a buyer. Banks have frozen NIS transactions, and Serbia has only enough crude oil to operate until November the 25th. Vučić said Belgrade wants to avoid nationalizing Russian assets and may make an above-market offer if Russian negotiations with Asian and European partners fail. Russian Gazprom and Gazpromneft hold 56% of NIS and are willing to transfer control to a third party. Serbian finance minister warned that US sanctions could hurt economic growth, credit ratings and foreign investment. Let's take a listen in.
Vi ste u posljednjih par mjeseci i mi smo svi zajedno radili sve kako su naši prijatelji iz Rusije rekli. Pregovaraju, mi smo podržali, razgovaraju, mi smo podržali, prva strana, druga, treća, nije ni važno i od toga ništa bilo nije.
Dugo vremena bili smo veoma strpljivi, bili smo veoma lojalni Razgovarali smo više puta sa našim ruskim partnerima, međutim vremena više nema i mi možemo da čekamo još jedno 3 ili 4 dana.
Gilbert Doctorow joins us once again to discuss this ongoing situation in Serbia. Gilbert, Serbia has 7 days of fuel security left. How serious is this situation for Belgrade's energy stability?
It is very difficult. It is a big stress for Serbia, but it's part of a bigger picture. And I think we can make sense of this only when we look at the bigger picture. Well, two big pictures. One is the effort by the United States and the EU to limit Russia's holdings, Russia's control of energy installations, plants outside of Russia. That is, go back to Mr. Trump's sanctions on Lukoil and Rosneft, and now the United States' heavy pressure on Serbia with regard to Russian ownership or control of the niche refinery. At the same time, there's another big picture, and that is the EU. About 20 minutes of this morning's programming on Euronews was all about Serbia and its candidacy for EU membership, which is heavily handicapped by its unwillingness to agree to the EU foreign policy of sanctions against Russia. So Mr. Vučić is in a tough place. He is being pressured by the United States, but even more strongly by the Europeans, in a way that is reminiscent of what happened in Ukraine in November, December 2013, during the Maidan disturbances, which were then largely supported and directed by the United States. In today's situation, where the West, collective West, is applying enormous pressure on Serbia to fall into line and to abandon its alliances and friendship with Russia, the EU has taken over the dominant position as the forcing side. Here you see the EU is saying that Serbia has no chance of becoming an EU member state if it doesn't fall into line right now and disown its relationships with Russia. It's amazing that Europe has learned nothing from the last 10 years and the disaster of Ukraine. They're repeating exactly the same formula in Serbia now. And Mr. Vučić is the Yanukovych of today, which is a very sad situation for everyone involved.
Okay, Gilbert Doctorow, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. We now move over to North America, and Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum condemned violence during protests in Mexico City on Saturday. Thousands marched under the banner of Generation Z, denouncing rising crime after the public killing of an anti-crime mayor earlier this month. In the capital, a small group of hooded protesters tore down fences around the National Palace. Riot police responded with tear gas, and clashes injured 100 officers, including 40 needing hospital treatment. Sheinbaum urged peaceful demonstrations, saying violence is never the way to achieve change. The Public Safety Secretary echoed her concern about the injuries to the police. The group Generation Z Mexico says it is non-partisan, representing youth frustrated with violence, corruption and abuse of power. However, the government questioned how many young people actually participated, claiming political opponents and social media bots largely promoted the marches. Joining us now is Emilio.
Hay que fortalecer la estrategia, pero no es este llamado que hacen. Bueno, hay quien llamó a que todo mexicano tuviera un arma. No, eso no estamos de acuerdo. No estamos de acuerdo. No lleva a nada. La violencia no lleva a nada. Por eso hoy que hubo una manifestación ahí en la Ciudad de México, donde dicen que marcharon jóvenes, pero en realidad había muy pocos jóvenes, y que de manera violenta quitaron unas vallas y rompieron vidrios, decimos no a la violencia. Si uno no está de acuerdo, hay que manifestarse de manera pacífica. Nunca hay que utilizar la violencia para cambiar, siempre por la vía pacífica.
We're now joined by Emilio Reynoso. He's a DW journalist from Mexico City. Thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World, Emilio. Pleasure to have you. President Sheinbaum, of course, we heard her statements. She just condemned the violence that occurred, that injured over 120 people in Mexico. Does this unrest expose a deeper public frustration with Mexico's security crisis?
Hey, Thomas. Indeed, we have to recall that President Sheinbaum's party, Morena, have this now historical policy of denying responsibility and blaming past administrations. In this same press conference, Mario Delgado, the Secretary of Education, minimized the Gen Z movement, saying that they are bots only, and blaming their detractors spending too much money to make them look them bad. So, but let's recall the ex-president Andrés Manuel López Obrador, founder of the Morena party. The security policy was abrazos no balazos, meaning hugs and not bullets, regarding to members of the organized crime. We must recall also that these police forces arrested Ovidio Guzman, son of El Chapo Guzman, heir of the cartel of the Sinaloa, and let him go. And in small cities, cartel members used to attack police patrols on a daily basis. And the President AMLO said that we cannot attack them back because they are human too. But then you see these levels of violence used against manifestations like the Gen Z. Last year in Zacatecas, Mexico, the 8M protest, the Women's Day protest, was subdued with amounts of violence never seen before. So we have seen terrible videos about yesterday's march in both sides, civilians getting injured, as well as police officers. There are videos of a man holding a Mexican flag, not attacking anyone, and then is taken down and he disappears in a sea of police officers. There's another man who tumbled down and was defenseless on the ground and was kicked on the head by 3 police officers. Also, this bloc, the black bloc, the ones that were supposedly generating the violence, took a lot of police officers and hit them. So this is something that we cannot say who started what in this point.
Yes, Emilio Reynoso, thank you very much for taking the time and joining us here on NewsX World. It's a pleasure to have you and get your insight on that ongoing situation in Mexico. We now move over to Ecuador next, and the public began their voting on whether to allow foreign military bases and draft a new constitution that could expand the powers of the Trump-friendly president. National Electoral Council President Diana Anatimate opened the polls, saying the day reaffirms that democracy is exercised, honoured and defended by voting. Nearly 14 million voters will decide on 4 key questions addressing rampant drug violence and economic reforms. Polls are scheduled to close at 5 p.m. local time or 10 GMT. Ecuador's President Daniel Noboa has announced the capture of the country's most wanted gang leader just as voters began casting ballots on security measures. Noboa has identified the suspect as Pipo Chavarria, the top leader of Los Lobos, calling him the region's most wanted criminal. Let's take a listen in.
Esta mañana también hemos capturado al objetivo de más alto valor que había en la lista de los criminales que tanto nos hacen daño y que hacen daño en toda la región, que es Pipo, líder máximo de los Lobos. Esto ha sido gracias a la cooperación internacional con España, con Estados Unidos. Hemos hecho una operación.
The president has said Che Guevara had faked his death, assumed a new identity and was hiding in Europe. Noboa has thanked the joint efforts of Ecuadorian and Spanish police for the successful operation. Details on the exact location of the capture were not disclosed, however. And that's all that we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more international updates.